Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition, we're honored to be joined by the Lignac Project and one of his co-founders, Brother Tony Mitchelson. Welcome to the Cultural Caravan, Brother Tony.
Thank you, Louise. Glad to be here.
Yes, and you know, I know that you're also a writer and you've also published your own book called Lignac Love.
Yeah.
In addition to the fact that you and Brother Ladine Kaliba, another writer who co-founded Lignac Project, please tell us what the Lignac Project is about.
Yes, well, Lignac happens to be a Creole word which means to give a little something extra. And I learned that when I was down in New Orleans. And the way it works down in the bayou is that if your mother sent you to the store to get something, when you paid for the goods, the store owner would give you some Lignac, a little something extra. If you were a kid, he may give you a couple of pieces of candy in a brown bag. If your mother sent you for some greens, he may throw in an extra sweet potato or two. And I thought that was a really good concept, so I brought it back north, and I sort of practiced that when I read my materials. I said, you know, we don't have to be store owners, but the one thing we do possess that we can give freely is time. So I always suggest to people, we should try to give 1 hour per month of Lignac.
Well, you know, I think about the fact, I know that you also offer workshops or specials called Fat Tuesdays, once a month, I believe, at the Sisters Uptown Bookstore in Harlem. Tell us about those
Yes, well,
events.
Fat Tuesdays is an event consisting of poetry, music, and just dialogue amongst people. The Sisters Uptown Bookstore is at 1942 Amsterdam Avenue in Manhattan, and we're there the second Tuesday of every month from 7 until 10 p.m. And we divide that time up between featured performers. We usually have 3, and we have a break in which people can mix and mingle. We have a house band, and then we wrap up the evening with open mic in which other poets and performers come up and do their thing. And what happens is we're finding that people become energized, that those who are giving Lignac and those who are receiving the Lignac are charged up about what they've experienced, and they sort of gather that and take it back into the communities. And that's what we want to do, have people become more involved in our arts and our education and our culture. So that's the Lignac Project.
Wow, and you know, when you think about that, and basically we're very excited about this episode because this is part 2 of an episode featuring some giants in the literary world that are right here in our midst here in New York. Please tell us about Brother Luis Reyes Rivera.
Let me introduce a prolific writer, author, jazz, poetry, performance artist, professor of history and literature, editor and recipient of over 21 awards. Welcome to the Cultural Caravan, Mr. Luis Reyes Rivera.
Thank you.
How are you doing today, my brother?
All right.
Yeah, good. Luis, you've done so many things in your life. Let's trace back a bit. When did you first take an interest in writing?
Oh, I was 9 and 10. Cousin of mine had a typewriter, brand new, and I'm visiting her, and I'm actually inquisitive. You know, what is that? Right? And do you know how to work it? Well, how about if I create a story? Could you type it out for me? And I did. And but she didn't like the story, so I didn't pursue what was a natural inclination. It happens that the story is just very quick. I loved Westerns, I still do. And especially the old ones, pre-1970 Westerns. In either case, what happens is I had this character, Black Bart, completely dressed in black with a black horse. He comes into town to rob the bank. And the sheriff, all dressed in white with a white horse, stops him as he's coming out the bank with the money. And so they square off in the middle of the street, and Black Bart outdraws the sheriff and shoots him, gets on his horse, and rides out of town. And my cousin asked me, she says, how can you let this guy get away with that? He robbed a bank and he shot the sheriff, right? And I says, because I get tired of the bad guy always getting caught and killed. I figured some of them had to get away at some point, but she didn't want to hear it, so I stopped writing or thinking about things like that. When I was 15, someone made me very angry, and a good friend of mine, and because he was my friend, it wasn't about fighting him. So I just left him, walked away, went upstairs, got into my bedroom, and I actually laid across my bed crying, but behind my anger. And the interesting thing is that for some reason, I pulled out a sheet of paper and I started writing. And within 15 minutes, I had finished the poem from beginning to end. And I looked at it and I says, wow, man, you wrote a poem. This works. And it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. You can write. Well, that's what you're going to do. You're going to be a writer. No, 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 no. You're not going to be a writer. You are one now. You need to know that. The rest of the world don't need to know that yet. Yeah, man, but there's a lot of stuff that you don't know about writing. That's okay. From here on in, you're going to find out all there is to know about writing, no matter how long it takes. And you'll be able to do it without any problem. I turned away from school because I was a straight A student up until that point. And no one ever told me that I had that capacity. So obviously the school wasn't going to give me what I needed. So I turned the library, the bookstore, the bar. Back then you hung out in bars, and the streets. They became my curriculum for learning how to write. Right? I studied for 14 years before I decided on what form of writing I would manifest most.
Wow, well, it seems like at an early age you were already exercising creative writing and creative thinking. That's amazing, Luis. Who were some of your influences during your early years of writing?
I would say, interestingly enough, my grandmothers were more my influence than anybody else. They instilled a sense of ethic in me, in us. They very simple. In Spanish, the word simple is sencillo, but it doesn't mean the same thing as it does in English, right? It means basic, earthy, earth-bred, from the land, right? And they were very simple people that way, right? And they had a lot of heart. They encouraged me a lot. One of my grandmothers made me read the Bible in Spanish every day from the time I was 7 to 11, when she spent most of those years with me. Before I could go out to play, I had to read 2 chapters and explain them to her.
Wow.
What she didn't know that she was doing, right? I mean, she pushed the ethic, but what she didn't know what she was doing was laying down the foundation for me to understand literature.
Right.
Because the Bible is poetry.
Yeah.
It's a collection, a 700-year collection of one people's poetry.
Wow. Okay. Now you are often referred to as the janitor of history. That's quite a reputation to have, Luis. How has your knowledge of history influenced your writing?
Oh, that's why I'm called the janitor of history. I'm the guy that sweeps the stuff up that's hidden underneath the rug, that's hidden in the closet. Right? I'm the one who has to clean that out, straighten out what it was that that you laid out, right, as a line to follow. I needed to understand me. I needed to understand the relationship between the Puerto Rican and the United States citizen. And I also needed to understand the connection that I automatically felt between people of the Caribbean, including Puerto Ricans, and the African American from the United States. In order to do that, I had to delve into and search through the history of the Caribbean, of Puerto Rico, and of the United States from the Afro side. As a youngster, when I was learning about writing, people told me, my teachers told me, that the bad people to read are all in Europe. So I read them. I read the French novelists, I read the Irish poets, I read the German philosophers, right? I read the Russian novelists. I read the existentialists, the Marxists, the transcendentalists. I got into mythology, pre-biblical mythology, the Epic of Creation, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Pygmy Katabu from Central Africa. I mean, I was searching for all kinds of stuff, trying to understand my relationship to the world and why I felt the way I did. What I end up doing is incorporating those lessons or those allusions into my poetry, so that I write poetry oftentimes translating history into poetry.
Wow. Now, you went to City College, the City College of New York, and actually focused on journalism initially. You also got involved in some important political activities at the college which seemed to change your writing direction. What happened during that time to shift your interest towards writing poetry?
I trained as a journalist while in college. The activism is a slightly different issue. When I graduated from college, I had, by the way, before I went to school, I had worked for the Associated Press, and I was in the newsroom with a lot of reporters. There were 2 black reporters in that grouping, and from them I learned a lot of basics that piqued my interest. So when I went to college, I actually wanted to train as a journalist. I minored in journalism and had a double major in English and in sociology. What happens is, by the time I graduate, I attempt to reconnect with the Associated Press, UPI, Reuters, you know, those agencies that hire people and train them, or, you know, well, kick them. I mean, you know, they're out there kicking it as reporters, as editors, or what have you. They didn't want me, right? That color question was still very, very clear, right? I only want 1 or 2 of those who look like you. I don't want nobody else. I was realizing at the time that there was something crooked about journalism anyway, right? In terms of the reportage, right? You can pick and choose how to appear objective, but you're actually pushing a very subjective line. I promised myself at 15 that I would never use the art form, the gift of writing, to lie to anyone. And I concluded by the time I was 30, 31, that journalists are liars, right? And so, for the most part, or not unwilling to bend the truth. Let's put it that way, right? And so the most honest thing that I could do was to become a poet.
Now, your reputation as a writer, poet, and performer skyrocketed during the 1970s, and it still remains very lofty today. Your book, entitled Scattered Scripture, is a cultural and international masterpiece. There are poems in there that cross waters, lands, and languages. One poem in particular, A Place I Never Been, still has more hits on the internet than almost any other poem out today. I know you and El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, share the same birthday. What made you write that poem?
It was 1975, February 21st. I woke up that morning. I believe it was on the weekend. I didn't have to go to work. I woke up that morning, realized what day it was, and the fact that it had been 10 years since his death, and I had not written, really, anything about it, right? The significance of his death. I'd written a few editorials, you know, when I was in school, but never a concise work. So I began taking notes, attempting to work it, and realized that there was a lot about that day that I needed to appreciate in order to make the poem as real as possible. So I stopped, and for several weeks, and turned into months, I was researching everything that happened the week before his death and the week after his death, and concentrating on what kind of day it was that Sunday, February 21st. So next thing I know, it's May 19th, his birthday, my birthday. And I had not finished that poem, right? I had to do a reading that evening in Brooklyn. So I said, well, brother, you can't show up there without this poem finished. So I read through my notes, right? Put everything to the side and wrote that poem.
Wow. And, would you please do us a favor and share that great poem with our audience now?
Sure, no problem.
Great, great, okay.
A place I never been, especially for Malcolm X. Was you there? Was you ever there? In a place you never been, but you knew you was there before, and you was never there. I was. In a place I knew me to be when I was never really there, I was there. On a sunny Harlem Sunday, I was there. Was you? In a ballroom, on a beaming, gleaming Harlem corner in a sunny sunset ballroom, did you hear? In a shiny, shining wildlife ballroom, did you hear the bullet cry? Did you see the man fall on a bright and bosom Sunday? On a bosom bright street jam, spare me a dime, stale bread, bosom brother, sunny Sunday Harlem, was you there? Did you see the bullet who cried? Did you hear the man's fall? I was there. In a crowd of pride and treason, in a chill-filled room of mobs and patriots, in a crowded crowd of pride and treason, where scared scars was ducking on, scared screams ducking on, scared scowls ducking 'cause they heard the bullet cry. Duck! 'Cause they heard the reason the bullet cried. Duck! As the man showed the marks, old shackles left behind, as his back arched tall, breaking shackles left behind, I heard the bullet cry. No, not me! I saw the man fall in a place I never was, where I must have been before. I saw the man fall. Did you? Did you ever? Did you ever try to be where you never could have been, yet somehow you had to be there? On the 21st of the second month, in a double-aisle room, tight dancing, jumping, bawling floor, did you hear? Did you hear the gush of puddles gushing from the podium bench? Did you see the barrel stock kicking back a shotgun swing? Did you hear the pellets fly? Did you see the knowledge flow? Did you hear his woman's feet? Did you hear his woman? Did you see his woman's feet? Did you see his woman climbing over and up, over, up and over, face down rows of turned down faces? Did you hear his woman's plea? That's my husband, that's my husband. Was you there? Did you go? Did you go to hear a poem in his every word? Did you hear a poem in his every word? Did you hear a poem? Was you there? Did you feed the hollow cave of starving eardrums? Did you feed the hollow crave of eardrums starving? Did you go to hear his song? Did you hear him sing? I was there. In a place I could never be, I saw the bullet's tears tearing, I was there. In a place I could never be, I heard the bullet's tears tearing, I was there. I saw the bullet shiver, the lonely bullet shiver and push, shiver and crush through the horn-rimmed frames of a strong man's peace. I heard the bullet cry. Why me? Why me? Don't make me do it, don't make me. Taking aim at courage, I saw the bullet cry. Taking aim at courage, I heard the bullet cry. Did you? Did you? Was you there? Was you? Was you turning over chair holes, finding no room for cover space? Was you turning over chair holes, finding no room? Was you turning over chairs while the man was falling and the bullet begging as the man was falling and the bullet limping as the man was falling and the bullet breaking and the bullet breaking and the bullet breaking through the throbbing corner of a people's heartstream, turning chairs over chairs, finding no room? Was you there? Was you in a place you never been, but somehow you was there somehow and you was never there? I was there, in a place I had to be to hear the bullet cry. Murder! To see our manhood fall. Murder! To watch a part of me fall. I was there on a sunny Harlem Sunday in a place I never been, on the 21st of the 2nd in a room I can't forget, on a stage I never seen with a man I barely knew. I saw the bullet cry. I heard the man fall.
That is such a remarkable and haunting poem. It still remains one of my favorites, Louis. I just have to tell you that. Despite the very busy schedule you've had over the years, you still squeezed in some remarkable things. You formed a publishing company to help publish other authors. Over 200 books have gone to print as a result of your editing and publishing skills. A few dozen books have come out of your workshop at Sister's Place in Brooklyn, including my book, Lignac Love. What drives you to contribute to the arts the way you do?
It doesn't belong to any one person. Like Sekou has in a poem, a very cute little line. Some of those stars up there died out a long time ago, right? You with me? Literature and movement, social movement, have always accompanied one another. You'd be surprised how many poets were revolutionaries, how many revolutionaries were actually poets. Amilcar Cabral, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, Simón Bolívar, José Martí. I could go on and on with names of W.E.B. Du Bois wrote excellent poetry. We pay no attention to that quality. Marcus Garvey wrote excellent poems. We have no regard for that. But my thing is that it's not about the star, it's not about the individual, it's about the literature. Whatever I can do to help get that literature right out there, encouraged, I'm supposed to do that. Not just mine, right? Mine is there. It stands on its own, but it's not just about me. You can't have a social movement without those tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people involved. You can't have a literary movement with just a handful of examples, right? You got the mediocre, you got the developing, you got the good, you got the great, and you got the formidable. All of them together is what makes a literature real, right? So whatever I can do to assist in that, I'm supposed to do it. That's my job.
Wow, okay. Now, people may not know that you are the son-in-law of one of our greatest black writers, John Oliver Killens.
Yes.
You even went to Russia and learned more about the great black Russian poet Alexander Pushkin and helped with the editing of John Killens' book on Pushkin.
It was his last book. Well, it was the last book that he published but it was published posthumously. It's not his last manuscript. But yes, and I enjoyed editing that book. You know, back then when I went to Russia, the city was called Leningrad, after Lenin. There were more statues of Pushkin in Leningrad than there were of Lenin.
One of the things we'd like you to do before closing out the program is, would you please share one more brief poem with our audience?
No problem, no problem.
Okay, great, right. Great.
Or, O-R-E, I have seen myself, the common, crass, unrefined sample, dug up and touched by the callous, loving hands of simple folk who long to reach beyond the minds that punish them their nightly scraps. I have never been a diplomat. My manners, as my nightly prayers, have always been direct. Cursed are they who eat 3 times a day at the risk of the rest who can't.
Louis, you are such a cultural giant. You mean so much to our arts. I just want to say personally that on behalf of myself and the hundreds and hundreds of writers who have come through your workshop, we show up regularly for a reason, because you are the master at what you do. You go out and you help so many people, and we really appreciate that. On behalf of the Cultural Caravan, we just want to say thank you for coming by and sharing this, and you have to stop by again. And in the spirit of Lignac, I just want to say thank you and peace, my brother.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we encourage you to continue to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you.